Hey everyone, Rarity Dash here. Time for another Patreon-sponsored blind reaction. And this one comes to you courtesy of SA2K, who has requested that I react to The Wasted Potential of Adam Taurus by Eruption Fang. Yeah. This is going to be kind of interesting. I've been aware of this video for a while, since it came out really, because it got pretty popular with a rather vocal, dissatisfied segment of the RWBY fandom, and yeah, just seemed to gain a lot of traction. A lot of people, I think, are repeating stuff they heard in this video as like talking points to just kind of crap on RWBY and Volume 6 in particular, and Bumblebee and just everything there that happened. Yeah, people have definitely tried to get me to watch this before, but until now, until I'm actually getting paid to watch it, I steadfastly refused. And now that I am getting paid by a patron to watch this video, I will do so, and I am prepared. Because I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently. I do have my screen recorder set up so that I will be able to stop the video if the need arises to just kind of maybe provide a little bit of a counterpoint. Yeah, because I just expect that might happen. I'm prepared for it. Otherwise, this might be a little bit rough. So, going to be somewhat of a different reaction. Hopefully, you're okay with that. I mean, if you're going to me to watch this video, you probably know what to expect here. I would hope. Though that said, I mean, I'm open. Maybe there'll be something in this video that I agree with. Maybe he will have some good points. I'm prepared for that too. And if that is the case, then yeah, by all means, that's great. Either way, I'm interested to actually watch this, I guess, and see what I have in store. I mean, I guess it's as simple as that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this going and start the video. Here we go.
Adam, without a doubt, is, or should I say was, my favorite character in the series.
Well, you're
his
weird
design, his personality, his story, so much was there that all the show needed to do was explore it, expand upon his characters and the ideas that surrounded him. But you just couldn't do that, Rooster Teeth. And that's the whole point of this video. The expectations, the build-up, Adam being nothing more than wasted potential. But before I go any further, it's always important to start from the beginning. So let's rewind the clock all the way back to March 22nd, 2013, and talk first impressions. Adam was introduced all the way back in the Black trailer, so he was technically the fourth character introduced into the series after RWBY, Weiss, and Blake. In this trailer, he and Blake are sneaking aboard a cargo train transporting a ton of Schnee Company dust. Their plan is to plant bombs and destroy it all. On this train, they are met with Atlas Knights, where we get some pretty cool action. Spider droids then make an appearance, proving to be quite a formidable piece of tech. He and Blake are not capable of destroying it naturally, as their moves just don't work against it. So, what does Adam do? He charges up, absorbs a full energy blast, and completely destroys the tank. First impressions? Pretty damn high. He disintegrated a tank with a single blow.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool.
His combat are up there. But these are just robots. No matter how intelligent they may be, they don't compare to actual people. His fighting was good, but Blake's fighting was also really good. It's more so the destructive force he was capable of dishing out that was impressive. So what other first impressions are given off here? Well, right out of the gate, he's shown to be a leader. It's a two-man operation that he's clearly in charge of. When planting the charges, he has no regard for the people on board, so it shows that he doesn't value human life, but values what he is doing, which we would later find out is the White Fang. So he was stealthy, a leader, and his destructive capabilities were godlike. Blake, from the get-go this entire trailer, clearly doesn't want to be here, which is why at the end she abandons him. So by the end of it all, I'm left with the feeling of, alright, this looks like a boss character we're getting introduced to early on. So it was a really cool character introduction. Adam wouldn't make another on-screen appearance until the end of Volume 2 as a cameo.
Kind of a big gap there.
So what did we learn from the time in between? More lore is given about the White Fang itself, how a once peaceful organization began to become more extreme. While questionable to some faunists, the fact that it was getting results was good enough considering history has never changed. So we learn of these faunists that are part of this organization that are fighting for equality, or at this point to be feared because that's better than being discriminated. As said, Adam isn't here, but Blake does still talk about him.
I had a partner named Adam. More of a mentor, actually. He always assured me that what we were doing would make the world a better place. But of course, his idea of a perfect future turned out to be not perfect for everyone.
She describes him as someone who spiraled into a monster. She talks about how he believed in what he was doing, that this was the only way. Blake consistently talks about having different outlooks from him, which was ultimately the reason she ran. Adam walked that line of a gray character, that good and evil are arbitrary concepts. Yes, humans are being put down, but it's for the betterment of the Faunus. He's doing it in the same way that's been the reverse for Remnant's history. Faunus have always been put down so humans can thrive, so is he really evil in doing what he's doing, when so many have done the exact same thing in reverse and continue to benefit off their suffering? The two had completely different outlooks about how Faunus discrimination should be approached. It was the philosophies and ideologies that clashed between these two. It gave an interesting dynamic, how fighting for a good cause was both wrong, but also right. Blake herself even believed in the way they went about things for a while, and hundreds feel the same way. It was a well thought out concept to introduce a villain who isn't really a villain. How do you stop someone from leading a cause that helps Faunus lives? It was a concept that would do nothing more but remain as a concept. Adam's next appearance takes place in a flashback in Volume 3 prior to the trailer's events. This is the lead up and recruitment to the fall of Beacon. Cinder approaches Adam, attempting to convince him that assisting with Beacon's demise will help the Faunus be feared, as well as help Cinder's people. And this is where Adam's ideologies come into play. He refuses to assist Cinder in her plan because it is a human cause. He doesn't want to risk Faunus' lives for the cause of humans. It is something that he as a leader is fundamentally against.
What you need is to leave. You are asking my men to die for your cause, a human cause. That is not an idea I am willing to entertain.
It's not until Cinder returns later with some Fall Maiden powers in which his arm is forced into helping. Either help, or everyone gets killed. Once again, it's characterizing Adam as a leader who values the Faunus much more than he does humans. He's willing to do a job for Cinder if it means she won't slaughter his numbers. Given the scenario, it was his best bet. Next time we see Adam is the fall of Beacon. He unleashes Grim, his troops, and he goes wild, and this is where the tracks become shaky. Blake, up until this moment, never described her and Adam's relationship as romantic.
More of a mentor, actually.
Adam continuously calls Blake my love here, which isn't the problem. The way his character has been established continues to expand here a bit, talking about a revolution and delivering justice to mankind, playing off already well-established goals that drive him. Yang then enters the picture, and this is the moment where everything stems from. Before I go any further, a little pretext. Shane Newville, a former animator for the series and Monty's close friend, released a 36-page letter recounting his time working on the show after Monty died. It's quite the controversial letter. One of the things he mentions in here is the encounter between Adam, Yang, and Blake. According to him, the encounter was originally meant to be an all-out brawl between the three of them, something he was personally excited for, but was ultimately cut for an alternative scene. The thing about Adam is that at this point in the show, he had made almost no appearances that they could have taken him in whichever direction they wanted. He had a cool attack against the spider droid, but that was just a robot. According to Shane, some of the animation was already rendered of the fight between the three. He knew it wasn't going to be used for this moment where it was intended, but was told they'll find a place to use it down the road. We all know the direction this scene ended up taking it. Instead of being a fight between the three, they instead chose to have Adam one-shot Yang, removing her arm. The thing about this moment is, it was a great moment. Shocking, jaw-dropping, unbelievable.
Yeah?
But in doing this, it set a precedent for Adam. His power level has now been cemented. He is in a league that Team Ruby couldn't hope to face with their current training
You're
level.
missing the point
and
here.
This is where it all went wrong. The show went for a high-risk, high-reward plot. They cut off Yang's arm, and it gets the reaction that it actually got from the audience. Yang now has PTSD, giving room for her character to have tremendous amounts of depth and room to grow, while Blake has to deal with living through a nightmare. Once again, the show now paints Adam as this end boss that is making early appearances, letting everyone know what he is capable of. He shows up, absolutely destroys with no effort, and then leaves. He set a marker for our characters to try and reach. He is here, we are here. We need to get there. However, the show never wanted to play by the rules they just set up. And from this point on, Adam isn't the same person either. Volume 4, we're introduced to a new character named Ilia. What are some traits that I could use to describe her? Faunus, same as Adam. Part of the White Fang, Adam as well. Misguided, that's Adam. One-sided romantic feelings for Blake, Adam. I just described Adam. Why do you exist? Hey, at least you have a tragic backstory. I mean, we don't know Adam, so at least you're standing out there. His next appearance is in Volume 5. He set up a meeting between Hazel and Sienna as he believes it is an act of loyalty, saying, "We know what you're capable of. You kinda killed a few of our people. This is the show. We're not against you." Now, the gesture itself is good. There's this acknowledgement that we don't want to be against you because we'd likely lose more people than it's worth and gain nothing from it. But then to completely go against the characterization that Adam has been built around, he murders Sienna. Yes, he's been established as this type of person who kills people. However, this is the first one of his kind that he's killed, and it completely goes against what he's been set up as. The first deal with Cinder was rejected because Faunus would die. It was a threat that made him agree. Now he's murdering his own kind for the faction. It went against the Faunus cause he fought for. Now he's no longer a gray character. He's just evil. And Volume 5 just keeps that going. He goes through with the attack on Haven for no clear motivation, and once again attempts to kill not only one, but an entire horde of only Faunus, which single-handedly led to everything his character has been set up to be being erased. Because this action not only strips his care of the Faunus away, but it also gets rid of the one thing that was driving him: humans. Because of what they did, Blake now becomes the target Adam has his sights on. His story could have continued as a one-man apocalypse raising hell for humans, but the writers made the worst decision possible, and they chose to have him chase Blake. The Faunus equality story, gone. Getting revenge on humans, gone. A romantic relationship plot, check. Adam was a strong character, not only physically, but also because of how he was capable of rallying people. His leadership skills were equally as much of him as any of his other traits. Blake talks about being manipulated, but by her own admission, it was because Adam was capable of convincing the Faunus. Blake herself may have felt emotionally manipulated, but it's hard to manipulate hundreds of Faunus if what he said didn't hold weight. So
I don't know about
ability
that.
To rally people to a cause and rise up.
People do that all the time.
Natural-born leadership. He was more than just physically scary as an individual. But Volume 5 once again gets rid of this characterization that he's been built up to have. The trailer, Blake's descriptions in the first 2 volumes, Volume 3 and even into Volume 4 a bit. Adam's entire characterization and setup for who he is and what he fights for just seemingly disappeared. Or it would have if Ilia didn't exist. If you didn't catch on earlier, the reason I kept comparing Ilia to Adam is because she is Adam. After Volume 3, everything about Adam didn't seem right, yet Ilia picks up right where he left off. She's the misguided one now. She's the one who fights for the Faunus. She legitimately stole Adam's character. There was never any need for her character to exist. By the looks of it, Adam was set up for redemption, or at the very least,
I don't want to
righted of
interrupt
his
the video.
misguided
I'll
wrongs.
wait.
But Ilia comes into play, taking his character and becoming redeemed herself. Even simple concepts that could have been made to reinforce Adam and his actions.
Stick around for the end thoughts. This might be a long one.
The fact that Faunus liked the results he was getting. Perhaps they may have not liked his methods of doing so, but the fact that they were being treated differently was good enough. Yet not a single Faunus spoke out in support of Adam. Instead, they are all treated as cowards who are too afraid to stand up. They are all given the moral high ground, once again painting everything that is being done into a black and white scenario, instead of introducing those shades of gray. Instead of having some characters refuse to try and stop Adam at Haven, not advocating for what he's doing, but willing to turn a blind eye if it means they would no longer be discriminated, showing that it's more than just right or wrong, good and evil, but instead it's almost as if the White Fang never meant anything from the beginning. Next is his character short, and it's pretty split as to how much of this represents Adam in which way. In my opinion, there are 3 scenes that are really good. The opening scene shows Adam donning the first ever White Fang mask, leading a heist on some Schnee dust. It's very similar to his very first representation in the Black trailer. While there's no action, it still shows how even in the early stages of his life, he acts as a leader and is doing something for a reason. It was a very classic characterization that we once had of him, and same goes for the next scene. Here, the peaceful White Fang is blocked and attacked by humans. They haven't done anything, but yet they're still being shot at for no reason. Adam steps in and kicks all of their asses, but in the process ends up killing one of them. Gira shuns him for killing, but Sienna praises him. Honestly, this moment in particular is more about Gira and Sienna, but in terms of Adam, this is once again that moral ambiguity coming into play. He killed a man and seemed remorseful for having done it, but is he in the wrong for doing so? The White Fang did nothing wrong, and yet these people come at them with guns and blades. They intend to kill them. So by Adam killing someone to protect a group of innocent Faunus, is he really the bad guy? That gray line with his character is once again shown. The other scene that I liked was the other dust robbery. There's not much substance here, but I liked it. The scene with him and Blake on the roof is equally as good as it is bad. What this did right was once again show those early characterizations of Adam coming out. The way he and Blake talk and the clashing of perspectives. Adam believing that what he's doing is right, while Blake believing there is an alternative solution. However, there's this weird underlying connection between these two that just doesn't feel right. As talked about, Blake never described their relationship as romantic, but she acts in a way that is romantic. It's trying to pretend like they were a thing, but also trying to avoid actually confirming anything. And the throne scene was just terrible. I mean, there's no other word. The show tries really hard to show that Adam has changed. He's becoming more selfish. And there's a lot of the audience who believes that this is a good thing. That clearly you can see that he's changing, and that's so good for his character. But just because a character changes doesn't mean that it's for the better. It doesn't mean that he has more depth. It just means that a once interesting character who was a morally ambiguous gray character became boring. You can undevelop a character, and that's exactly what happened. It tries to show this progressional change, but all you can see is that he became wasted. One that the audience no longer cared about. Then comes Volume 6.
I don't know if they cared in the first place.
The barometer for who he is and what he fights for has changed. The setup was always around 75% focus for the Faunus, 25% on Blake. But that percentage kept changing and changing until his care for the Faunus was reduced to 0 and 100% on Blake. It's important to note that his focus regarding Blake didn't come out of nowhere. Every time Adam was on screen, a percentage of his attention would be on her, but it's about how much. There was always this divide between Faunus and her, but after Volume 3, everything began shifting in favor of Blake. I don't know how many times I have to say this, but Adam just isn't the same person after Volume 3. So he manages to stalk Blake all the way to Argus, where he somehow learns of her plan and intercepts her. A fight breaks out and Yang once again shows up, and this is the moment that wraps all the way back to Volume 3. Like I said, Volume 3 set the standard for Adam. His power level was unmatched, but here Yang and Blake go toe-to-toe with him, despite any form of actual training. Blake legitimately, after the fall of Beacon, went on a boat, got home, went to Haven, and now she's here. There was no training of any kind on her end. Her skills didn't have time to develop because she was too concerned with gathering signatures. And Yang, despite some minimal sparring sessions with her father, it isn't enough to bring her to Volume 3's level. The thing about parts of this fight is that this is what Shane was referring to back in Volume 3. This was the sequence that was supposed to happen back then. It's why they're on equal footing, because at the time, there wasn't meant to be such a power difference between them. Yang and Blake aren't on the same level they set up, but they still wanted to do the fight without having worked their way up to it. Adam's the final boss, who's been set on very easy, so you can win. And of course, his mask. Well, there goes the unique tragic backstory, Ilia. This reveal was so bad. Don't get me wrong, the brand is cool as hell. It explains Adam's past actions and why he's always been so dedicated to his cause, which makes it even more insulting that that's no longer who he is. This man isn't dedicated to helping the Faunus. He's killed so many of them that it's irrelevant. A thing like this evokes sympathy for a character, almost as if there was meant to be some sort of moral ambiguity regarding humans and the Faunus. Seeing humans, seeing the Schnee Dust Company branding living, breathing Faunus, treating them as nothing more than property that is owned. It's almost as if this brand was to shift the moral tone of the series, trying to grab a larger portion of the audience to now side with the White Fang's violent methods as being needed, so no other Faunus would suffer a similar fate. This sounds familiar. It's the same moral ambiguity that was set up in Volume 2. The time in which Adam was a morally gray character, and you could argue in his favor. But this is so insulting because It's irrelevant to what they made him. The reveal is ultimately useless. Instead, they have him screaming, "Why would she choose you?" He was changed into a raging ex-boyfriend, and everyone hated it. And part of this is why I hate Yang's character. Not only does she not know Adam, only knowing stories that Blake tells her, but the writers had the balls to put in a line saying, Adam was pretending to be who he was when he was in the White Fang. Just because Blake didn't take her discrimination as hard as Adam, doesn't mean Adam was evil from the start. This line pretends that he never cared, that right from the get-go, he was always ready to slaughter every single person who stands in his way, which just isn't true. That moral ambiguity that he was built up in having is completely washed away just so it can feel like Yang is sticking it to him. But the fact of the matter is that Yang knows absolutely nothing about Adam. She's never had a single conversation with Adam, and the fact that he even knows her name is even more shocking. Once again, go back to Volume 2. Blake literally describes her and Adam's relationship as a student-mentor deal. She never saw it as romantic, yet the scene plays out with that being the motivation. Everyone says he was abusive. Yes, his first major on-screen role, he was hitting and stabbing Blake. But you have to remember, prior to this moment, Blake only talked about him, and she didn't talk about him in the romantic way. So it wasn't an abusive ex-boyfriend being established, it was her teacher believing in a misguided cause. And of course, they kill him off. The small window of sympathy it tried to grab completely fell on its face because the things that made him redeemable were stripped away the previous 2 years. There's no kind of backstory. We don't get to witness how he got his brand, where he got it, why it is where it is. Revealing it opened up a lot of doors to give us some backstory and open our eyes to the hardships of what it's like to be a Faunus. Not through the eyes of a girl who goes to a school and has a hard time accepting friends, but the genuinely inhumane torture they are put through that ends up shaping people like Adam to become the person he did. But it was far too late for that. No one is born evil. Step by step you go through life making good decisions as well as bad ones. It's about recognizing where you're stepping and when you're stepping in it. Instead of showing Adam's steps to how he got branded and the steps that followed afterwards, he's left as a final chapter without having read the rest of the book. So the show doesn't pull in an audience where Adam could be a topic of conversation. He's left hated and uncared for. I genuinely believe the writers knew they messed up Adam. There was nowhere for his story to go because they did such a poor job at keeping him consistent. Because if they thought this was a good conclusion, God save everyone. This was a conclusion, and not a good one. Everything stemmed from that Volume 3 encounter. If it was just this fight, then they'd have been on equal footing the entire time. Adam's direction wouldn't have been lost or handed to another character. He suffered not only from the writer's hands, but the audience's as well. People often preferred simply wanting some cool fights over wanting a well-written character who was part of cool fights. The audience shunned who he was but liked the action he provided, and so his story never had the opportunity to play out. They never knew what to do with his character, when in reality Volume 1 and 2 did it the best. He's not in them. Adam never should have been a character who made frequent appearances. His influence in the White Fang should have been something that was seen through osmosis. How the general public reacts to Faunus, not seeing exactly what it is he is doing, but knowing that what he was doing was changing things. Keeping him as that fabled character Blake always talks about, or that endgame boss that our characters never wanted to encounter. Knowing that he was dangerous because he led what was essentially an army, but he doesn't need an army to be considered dangerous. That's the type of man everyone thought he was going to be. That's the type of man the show set him up to be. And that's why the end result is nothing but disappointing. He is the definition of wasted potential, and I'd honestly be shocked if they top it. Adam, you may have died in Volume 6, but I think we all know you died in Volume 3.
Okay, well, thought I'd have a lot to say during that, but I had almost nothing to say, so, that's that, but, I mean, I have stuff to say now, so, we'll get into that, some counterpoints. Where to start? That's the question. I guess my biggest contention is this whole idea of power level, that he actually used that phrase, and it's not really, it's kind of missing the point here. I mean, everything with what they did with Adam in Volume 3 is about power dynamics. It's about his Well, it's about different things, really. I mean, with Blake, it's about the power dynamics. It's about just the hold he has over her, how he just has this control, and that's why we don't even see a fight. I mean, there is ostensibly a fight that takes place, but he just overpowers her. That we have them facing off, and then we cut back to it, and she's on the floor and down, and that's the point. It's not that he's like that much stronger than her, though he probably is a little bit. I mean, when they eventually do fight in Volume 6, Blake puts up a fight, but it's not like she's going to win on her own. The point is just the hold that he has over her, and that's what Volume 5 did in the end. And I know that scene, it's not satisfying. I will say that, the Volume 5 showdown between Adam and Blake, it's not a satisfying scene, but I get what the writers were going for with it in terms of just showing that Blake has shed that hold, that she has learned to stand on her own and not be so intimidated by him. It was all about showing that instead of when he makes that slash and she attacks him, it's about showing his expectation. He expects her to run like she always does, and she doesn't. She goes into a counterattack instead. And that is what that's all about. But with Blake, it's all about counterpoint. With Yang, though, it's more about just her recklessness, or not thinking things through, or just putting her feelings so over like anything else. She just wants to save Blake so badly in that moment that she approaches the situation in such a way that that ends up happening to her. I mean, it's not really, they didn't fight. That's the thing. It's not really a case of power level. He just has a very deadly attack, and Yang wasn't prepared for it because she was blinded by her rage. It's like we never saw like an actual display of like them actually having a direct confrontation. It wasn't like a one-on-one fight. It was just Yang leaping head first, or arm first, I guess, into his attack. So just this idea that is somehow a sign of like this unsurmountable or insurmountable difference in strength is kind of ridiculous to me. Like, I mean, he made the point himself that in the Black trailer, both Blake and Adam were very impressive, almost equally so, until you got to that final slash. And that was just that was the same attack. I mean, you can disintegrate an entire robot. It can also, I guess, go through aura and even cut through that, cut off a person's arm. Even with that, it's not like that's everything. It's just an attack. It doesn't. It's not like Dragon Ball Z. It's not all about just this difference in power level that we. It's just that is ridiculous to me. Also, this insistence on Adam being a great character, I think we're ignoring. We're really ignoring the possibility that he was just posturing. And I think a lot of it with Adam is posturing, and it always was. I mean, yeah, he makes a speech in the flashback episode in Volume 3, Chapter 7. But the thing is, that comes after the scene in Volume 2 at the end. And I noticed we didn't really talk too much about what he said in that scene, but it's actually pretty important. That is how we established his character in the show, and we established it by saying quite firmly that it's basically, if you recall, what was happening is Emerald and Cinder, I think, or was it Mercury? I don't know, but those three, they were talking about the White Fang dying in the tunnels. They were saying, oh, the White Fang are dying, they're not going to listen to us anymore. And Adam says, don't worry, or he doesn't say don't worry, but he says, like, they'll listen to me. But the implication is, yeah, you don't have to worry, I'll handle this, they'll still fight for you. And to me, I think that's in complete contrast to his bravado in the flashback scene. And this is already prior established that he's willing and seems to be firmly on board to keep the Faunus dying for Cinder. So, and I mean, I guess he does get threatened, and that is like a big part of why he abandons his pride and does it. But getting from that to where he is in Volume 2, he's clearly already well past his inhibitions. He's ready to, or he's like really eager to to do this. I mean, he didn't have to say that. He didn't have to say, oh, don't worry, I'll do this. I mean, by that point, he already was established as a willing participant here, and I mean, I guess you could argue that he would still, but just he says it with like a smile. It's really just a telling scene, I think, that he is just on board with this, and I think we can't really ignore that. I mean, that was in Volume 2 again, and also just we keep flashing to that scene with the flower on the ceiling, the rose, and that was from when Blake talked about him. But I think, well, for one thing, there's the mentor thing. That I think is a bit. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, call that I had to take. But yeah. Anyway, the mentor thing. That is. Lost my train of thought, damn it. Worst possible time. But yeah, the mentor thing, it's not necessarily, I mean, Blake says it, but you got to consider that she's pretty elusive in a lot of the things that she says. I mean, like when she first tells Sun the story, she's elusive to the point that, I mean, the question of her parentage was such a interesting topic before the reveal in Volume 4. I mean, the idea that she was born into the Faunus, or born into the White Fang, what that exactly meant, it was left kind of ambiguous, and a lot of people just thought she was like an orphan or something. But similarly, I think just you can't really take her words exactly at face value when she's talking about Adam. She's, I mean, it's a very clearly sensitive issue for her, and if you think about the idea that she was abused, which I always, I mean, I think the writers even said that was the case, then it's understandable, I think, that she would want to put some distance between herself and the relationship. And I think that might be a pretty big part of what that was. Her just insisting, or her saying he was a mentor. And the interesting thing is, in that very monologue that she has, moments later, she goes back to partner. I mean, she says partner, then mentor, then she goes back to partner. And it's not really that clear. But I think to insist that it wasn't romantic is to ignore a lot of things as well. Namely, just the whole setup with the trailer. It kind of, I mean, the whole partying and just everything, the feel of it is that they're a couple, I think. And a lot of people would assume that. And then there's the inspiration. I mean, whether you want to get into the whole question of who represents what, the fact is that Blake is a sure nod to the story of Beauty and the Beast, and that is very much a romantic fairy tale, and Adam, I mean, in some regard, is, at least by name, a nod to the beast. So, of course it's romantic. Of course there is that connection. It was going to I don't see why it wouldn't be. I mean, she puts that distance there, but I don't really think that's, like, definitive proof that it wasn't something. And, I mean, he could be a mentor and a romantic interest as well. That's the other thing. I mean, that happens, and there is a noted difference in age, I think. I mean, we don't really know how much, but I would say he's at least, like, 5 or so years, maybe, or I don't know, maybe it's less, maybe like 3 or 4, but at least 3+ years difference between them. So potentially more even, I don't know, but yeah, the point is, it's very possible that he was both to her, both her mentor and more. So, yeah. And when she talks about him next in Volume 3, in the whole scene with Yang, it is a more romantic suggestion to it, the whole scene, in, I think, Chapter 9. So, yeah, and also back to the topic of moral grayness, she does specifically say she disagrees with his methods, that she implies that they're very much just wrong, and she calls him a monster. So I mean, that's a pretty harsh term. And in another scene, in the scene with Sun, in like earlier in the volume, she says he's dark, and not in the same way that Sun means it, where it's like, it's edgy, the masks. She seems to legitimately see a darkness there, and yeah, I I never really felt it was that ambiguous that Blake and those most reasonable people would see what Adam was doing as completely the wrong means. I think that was always, I mean, you can talk about moral grayness, but I think it was always supposed to be the case that Adam was at least, like, just, or rather, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to really say, but he's just not in the right. I mean, even going back to the trailer, we establish his character by showing him committing a terrorist act and killing people. Yeah, he has no qualms about that. He seems to actually revel in it. Like, what's the line? What about them? He just seems to enjoy the thought of them dying. And I think a bit too much is made out of the idea that there was this great moral grayness to him, that he did have these I mean, that's another thing he kept going into. He's just Ilia. That's no, we never see him struggling with it. We never see him questioning himself. I mean, we never really see him much, but there wasn't ever any implication in anything that Blake said that he struggled against the change. I mean, there is a sense of change, and whether it was change or whether he was just being more honest with himself as time went along, we never really see him think that he's on the wrong path, that he is making the wrong decisions here. He's always just so firmly shown to just continue with what he's doing. I don't know. I'm probably not countering this very well, but I'm trying. It's just a lot, I don't know. There's just so many things to say with this topic that, yeah, the Ilia thing really bothered me. I mean, she's a different character. She clearly, I mean, she may be what you wanted from Adam, but she's not what Adam was supposed to be, I don't think. Adam, I think they had it firmly in mind that he was going to not be a good guy. He was going to be a yeah, murderer and monster. I mean, just the way, the fact that they use that word, that's not really that he became a monster. I mean, obviously it's a play on the beast thing again, but just that whole idea that he would be described in such terms, it really is telling, I think, that we're not really supposed to sympathize with this character. And I guess you might really find the whole idea of the White Fang compelling. Okay, I mean, I guess it could be, but I mean, it's interesting, but it's, I mean, most people would agree that terrorists are not a good thing, that there's rarely a reason to take it that far, I would think. So, I don't know. I never really saw it as that kind of thing. I mean, it's always been more about Blake's story, about her separating herself from that, pulling herself out, taking herself from the shadows, and becoming a better person, a more noble, more strong person. And Adam was just, he really was just like this, he was the shadow, he was what she escaped from. He, I don't know, it's, I know of other things to say, but yeah, the Ilia thing, that bugs me. I don't really think that's quite fair. I think Ilia is her own character, and I never really saw Adam in that role of being one to question whether what he was doing was right. I think he was pretty well convinced of it. He, and if, I mean, I guess what this guy wanted was for the audience to be challenged on whether or not what Adam was doing was right. But I just, again, I think the clear answer always was that it wasn't. I mean, whether or not you, I mean, obviously, racism is bad, but, do we really need to make that the message of the show? Is that really a complicated or interesting message? That racism is bad? I don't know. I think most people know that. But, yeah. And, what else? Oh, another thing, I just remembered this. Blake, the idea that Adam's scenes became more about Blake as they went along, I'm not sure that's quite true either. I mean, it kind of is, just by the fact of well, yeah, they kind of are, but the point is, that's mostly because that's what's relevant. But the thing is, Adam's story isn't really any more about Blake after Volume 3. Or not directly, at least. I mean, he is not really focused on... he says what he says in the Volume 3 finale, or not the finale, but Chapter 11. The whole thing about, like, killing everyone she ever loved or whatever. I forget his exact words. His pledge to just do that. But I think that's more just an intimidation thing. I don't think he really was going to go all obsessive at that point. He wasn't going to... I don't think it was even going to go look for her. It wasn't really a priority. I mean, it's never a priority for him. You'll note, like, in the flashback scene in Chapter 7... he says forget it to the lieutenant guy, and was going to go back to Haven until Cinder arrived. But and I think it's similar after the end of Volume 3. He doesn't go looking for her. He doesn't chase after her. I mean, he easily could have caught her if he really wanted to and made her submit. If she was running away with Yang, just unconscious Yang, he wasn't going to... she was not going to outrun him there. If he really wanted to get her, he could have made her submit right then and there. But he just... I think has it in his head that he has such a firm grasp on her that it doesn't matter if she runs. She just is so. She's basically she basically belongs to him regardless of where she is, and that it's only a matter of time before she gravitates back to him. I mean, that's kind of his initial reaction to seeing her again. Is it's not really one of. Surprise in any sense. It's more just like a sense that he knew this was going to happen and he's prepared for it and he's happy, and it's I think a similar thing. He doesn't send anyone after her. It just so happens that she in Volume 4 goes somewhere that he has eyes because the Albanes are loyal to him and report to him. He finds that trail again, and it's only because she then starts meddling in his plans. She looks into his plan, in fact, and then with her father and his power of influence, she begins to present this counter narrative that, like, I mean, goes against what he's trying to do with Sienna by, presenting this whole story that she's been killed and assuming that leadership. Because of Gira, there ends up being this divide, and it becomes a question of who the Faunus are going to believe, and that's not something Adam wants. And that is it's only after that he decides that Blake is an immediate problem and that he should make good on that pledge, and then sends people to do what needs to be done. Before that, I think he was prepared, obviously, to watch Blake. He sent Ilia, I guess, to spy on her, but it's not like... He was much more focused on Sienna and Haven and all that stuff than he was on anything regarding Blake until she became a problem again, which I think is only fair. It's only reasonable. It's not like he had this singular obsession. It just so happens that when we see him, it's mostly about Blake because that's when it's important for us to see him, because he is so integral to Blake's story and what's happening in it. But I mean, it's not until after Volume 5, after Blake basically takes everything away from him, that he then decides it's time to actually follow her, time to actually pursue her himself and make her the number one priority. Until then, his focus seems to be entirely elsewhere, or like mostly elsewhere. I mean, maybe a little bit, but I think it's a mistake to say there's some kind of increasing, like, I mean, I get it narratively, but other than that, like, it's not, his character isn't really that much more focused on Blake. That's the point. Adam, he, I don't know. I'm kind of forgetting what else he said. Trying to address everything, but I might miss some things I wanted to talk about. I know there was something else. What was it? I mean, there are probably several other things, but I mean, let's see. I guess there's the reveal of the brand, which I think... I mean, I kind of get where he's going from there. It does seem kind of wasted, like more could be done with that. But I think more what we were going for is that at the end of the day, though Adam is terrible and he's been responsible for so much heartache for everyone, this is where it all started. This is what creates a monster like Adam, is this kind of hatred. And I think that's still an impactful message, even if more, I guess, could have been done with it, I feel. But I don't really know if Adam is the character to address that with, or if he ever was. I mean, maybe you could argue, and I guess he just did, that that otherwise that Adam was a valuable lens into this, but I think I really think going forward that we can just have Blake sort of explore these questions of how we got here and where this all came from, and have her sort of examine what's going on with White Fang, or not the White Fang, the Faunus in general, by the SDC and all that. I think, yeah, that'll work out okay. Well, there we go. I think that's all I got to say. Probably be a cut there just because I'm trying to think of things and failing, and you guys don't need all the awkward silence. But yeah, that about sums it up. As for the video itself, I guess I didn't comment on that very much, but I think it was fairly well presented. I disagree with almost all of it, but it was presented pretty well, edited pretty well, so yeah, that's cool. And yeah, I guess I'll be interested to read the comments on this video. Let's see what you guys have to say. Tell me how wrong I am. But hopefully some people agree. Hopefully there are some people who see that these are not really that firm of arguments, that a lot of this is just sort of, I mean, a lot of it does feel like just spite over the fact that your headcanons didn't pan out, which is never how you want to approach things. That is just a sign of entitlement. I mean, this isn't the worst argument I've seen in regards to this kind of thing. I've definitely heard worse ones on the internet, but or read them at least. This is the only video I've seen on the subject, but it could have been worse. It could have been a worse argument, but I still think it's not really that convincing a one. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the reaction. Let me know if you did, and see you in the next one.